Hello, everyone. We are starting today this amazing session. This is a series of workshops we are going to have about Canada. And this is kind of first, information or basic information that you will need in order to learn how to immigrate in Canada. This is the first workshop, and this is a workshop that we do with our partner, Bright Immigration. Blaine Kumar here is the person that normally do these sessions for our startups. So I would like to pass the word to Blaine while all of you are entering to the room. Thank you so much for keeping the microphone just closed while Blaine is speaking. But Blaine, you're okay if they ask questions in the meantime when you are?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as I go through, every now and then I'll stop and ask for questions about the topic I just covered.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Blaine. So the word is yours.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well and everyone's safe. My name is Blaine Kumar. I'm the CEO of Bright Immigration. And today we're going to talk a little bit about immigration pathways, explain a little bit more about how it overall works, and then kind of go into further details from there. So I assume everyone could see my screen, the Bright Immigration screen. If you can't, for whatever reason, just message on the chat. So basically, this is the agenda for today. First is the discovery. So I like to kind of cover who's on the call and where they're from. So if you don't mind in the chat as I'm going through, if you could just type, what country you're from, if you have a startup or if you're looking for just immigration overall. And then we'll also cover temporary and permanent, the difference between the two, how permanent and provincial nominee and express entry works, and how temporary status achieves permanent residence, knock codes, which I'll explain, how to get a work permit, startup visa, closing thoughts, question and answers as well. And at the end, I do have an announcement as well at the end for you. So first thing is an introduction quickly. Toronto, Bright Immigration is a Toronto-based immigration firm. We are located right in downtown Toronto. So that's our office here. And we do work with LATAM startups, and we kind of help LATAM and people going through their programs and kind of navigate their immigration programs. Okay, so just before I go right in there, I'm just trying to see how to get the chat. Give me a quick sec. Okay, great. So I don't see anyone chat, Umir. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Umir. So you have a start there. And if anyone has, if anyone has anything else to add as we're going, it just gives me an idea of who I'm speaking to, and then I could kind of cater a little bit more of the conversation as well to your individual. So if I know you have a certain business background, maybe you don't have a startup, but maybe you're in business in other ways, at least it helps me navigate that conversation a little easier. Okay, so while I wait for you folks to kind of chime in, I will move forward. So there's two primary categories for immigration. There's temporary and there's permanent residence. So temporary typically is visitor visas, study permits, and work permits. Okay, and we do call them permits. Then you have permanent options, which is express entry, provincial immigrant nominee, startup. Now these ones mentioned here are economic programs. Then you have family sponsorship, and then you have humanitarian applications, refugee. There's other ways as well, but these are the ones we'll be speaking more about today. Okay. So the first thing I want to discuss here is a permanent. So permanent immigration, and what's the difference between federal and provincial. So I'm just going to draw. I usually just draw freehand to kind of explain it. And of course, as I'm going through, if you have any questions about what I'm covering, just type it into the chat. So the first thing is we have federal and we have provincial. Now, basically, I'm going to cover provincial first. So just like the US has states, we have provinces and territories. And each province and territory has immigration programs that's best suited for the needs of that province. So, for example, some programs may be to help people who've maybe graduated from a university in that province, or might be a program specific for those who have certain job titles. Like a province may need nurses, some province may need accountants. So that's how. So each province has their own program. But essentially, the provincial program is two stages. So the first stage is the province has to approve you. Okay. Now, depending on the program, as I mentioned, you may need to prove that you have a job experience. You may need a job offer from that province. So, a company in that province must offer you, or a company that has operations in that province must offer you a job. Typically, that's what you see fairly common. There's also business immigration options. So, you could either buy or start a business there and you could apply. So, the first thing is satisfying the province, okay, and then applying to them. Once they approve you, they're going to give you a nomination. Okay. Once you get the nomination, then you go to the second stage, which is the submission to the federal government. Okay. Now, this is another application that you would need. It's going to require a lot of the same information here, as well as probably more additional information. So this is a two-stage process. It does take some time, because you have to go through the province first. So that could be as little as a few months to a few years. And then you have to go to the federal, which will take at least 6 to 8 months if it's certain programs, up to another 2, 3 years. So this could be a bit time consuming, but it is still a good option for sure. Um, Now, one thing to kind of keep in mind is there is some people, I'm going to cover express entry on a side note later. Some of you may be, well, there's provincial nominees for express entry. I'll explain that later. Then you have federal programs. So federal programs is obviously the preferred one because you go straight to the IRCC, okay, which is the Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship Canada. Okay, this is the department that handles immigration. They're essentially the only entities that could issue permanent residence. Okay, provinces can't. Provinces could just make a nomination or recommendation, but the federal government and the IRCC is the only ones. So here you have programs like the Express Entry, which often common described as EE. You have Startup Visas one, right? These are pretty much your two prime, and then there's other programs like self-employed. Self-employed is people who have like cultural significance, or they're really successful musicians and they want to open a business here to maybe teach things like that. But these are your primary federal economic programs for immigration. Then you have then you also have like Atlantic Pilot, Northern Pilot. And then you have some other regional based programs. These are regional based. Okay. So this is like typically you need to have a sign off from that region. So we'll quickly touch on that as well. But this is essentially the high view of the two predominant areas when it comes to economic immigration is federal and provincial. Okay. Let me just see if anyone has any questions right now.
So far, no questions. But if
Question?
somebody has questions right now about, just the first part that Blaine just shared, just let us know.
Okay. Thanks, Miriam. So permanent residence, express entry. I'm going to explain what is express entry. I'm sure many of you probably researched and looked into it, but I'm just going to provide the level of clarity. The first thing to understand is express entry is not a program, it is a system. Okay. And what I mean by that is let me describe the system first. First thing is you go online, create a profile. You need language, you need a language exam, and you need 1 year of work experience. I'm going to cover work experience. I'm just going to put knock code here. We'll cover that. Okay. This is what you need to basically create a profile, language exam and work 1 year. Once you create a profile, you're going to get points, and you're going to go into a system, basically a pool, and the pool has hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of people in it. Now basically, just so when you do a profile and this is you right here, let's say your profile, your points equals 395 points. Okay. um, so 395 points, you have, let's say, 1 year of international experience. Okay. So basically, what this tells me is that you are a federal skilled worker. Okay, now I'm going to cover this shortly, but essentially, this is your profile. Let's say hypothetically, every 2 weeks, roughly, Okay, now please note that this isn't written in stone. It does change. Sometimes we don't see it for a month. Sometimes we see, one in 1 week and another week. But typically every 2 weeks, there's a draw. Okay. Now the draw is basically the government says, hey, anyone that has 420 plus points, they can apply for immigration. They get an invitation to apply. Okay. Now, when they do a draw, they neither do, and I'm just going to use acronyms here, but just write it down, Federal Skilled Worker, FSW, or they do Canadian Experience Class, CEC, or they do Federal Skilled Trades. Okay, I'm just going to write the trades out to help you guys remember. Okay, or they do PNP, Provincial Nominee Program. Now, remember I told you about before the earlier slide here, I mentioned here EE on the provincial side. So let me just quickly touch on that. Basically, there's two ways to apply to the provincial nominee program. It depends on the program options. It depends on what program you fit into. You can either apply directly, usually online, sometimes paper, to the province. So it goes into the province, or you fill out your profile and the province will say, hey, I see they have access to this pool, the province. And they're like, hey, you know what? This person, even though they have 295, they have a job code I like, they have a knock code, or they have work experience in this province, or whatever the criteria is, and they'll be like, yes, I'm going to select you, and I'm going to give you 600 points if we approve you, which was usually more than enough points to qualify for any program. So that's how the PNP. So this is why I say again, it is a system. Express Entry is a system. It's not a program. These are your programs here. Okay. So going back, federal skilled worker, you need 1 year of work experience to qualify. Canadian experience class, 1 year Canadian skilled work to qualify. Federal skilled trades, you need to work in trades, which is like plumbing, electrical, carpentry, mechanics, certain trades you could qualify for. So once you do this profile, the system will then, based on how you input it, will know, hey, are you here or are you here? And then basically the points, sometimes it's for these programs, sometimes it's just for this program. And then sometimes federal skilled trade could be 360-point draw. This usually happens maybe once to three times a year. Sorry, usually 2 to 3 times a year. So the pool is important. You get yourself into the pool, and then you kind of let the system do its magic from there. Okay. So this is how the express entry system works. Now, I'm just going to circle Canadian experience class. Um, Canadian experience class is an important aspect. You may have heard recently some big news, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, that the government has essentially allowed people with really, whoever had 1 year of work experience in Canada in a skilled job, which I'm going to cover next, what a skilled job means. They essentially got invited. They moved to second stage. This was never done before. This was a very big event, which is an important thing to keep in mind. We do not know where immigration is going to go. We do not know if they're going to do it again. We don't know where they're planning, but we should assume that they may continue to do this for a while because Immigration Canada has set some very high objectives. And I think that they will need to definitely do that, especially as the US opens up immigration. The UK is getting more aligned with the Brexit. There's going to be more competition for people. So, this Canadian experience class, we're going to talk about this very specifically in the later slides. Before I move on, do we have any further questions, Miriam, or are we okay?
Looks like we are okay so far. I'm not sure that anyone has questions at this point. You can open your microphone if you want to. I think they are okay so far.
Okay, great, perfect. I'm assuming the people here may already know a lot of these details, but we'll cover into the specifics. But knock codes, quickly to cover what a knock code is. If you recall in my earlier slide, I marked A, B, O, A, B. This is considered skilled. And I'm going to tell you what these letters mean. C and D is considered non-skilled. Okay. Basically, every job in Canada has a knock code. So let's say it was like 0111. Okay. Now, every knock code is 4 digits and it fits into a job title. Now these numbers, sorry, that's not too clear. Let's see, 0111. So basically, this job title, this is actually a knock O. Okay, so this is then deemed skilled. But let's say if you were a bank teller, if a waiter or a chef or something, or not chef, sorry, a waiter, then that would be considered a C, a knock C. This is considered not skilled. Now, in order to qualify for express entry, remember we said that you needed work experience, right? Knock OAB. So essentially, you need to have skilled, and the same thing here in the skinning experience class. You need to have knock OAB. So it's important you understand your knock code. Okay, this is very important. It's important that you make sure you also understand it's a correct one. Like I said, if you were a waiter, you wouldn't qualify. But if you were a manager, assistant manager of the restaurant who oversaw the waiting staff, that qualifies. So it is fairly broad, and you want to take advantage of this now because this is one area the government may want to decide to sharpen. Right? They may want to do more specific knock codes, not have it so broad. Okay, but that's essentially knock codes. So temporary or permanent, how to get a work permit, LMI exempt. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to cover what an LMI is, what an LMI exempt is, and then basically how to get a work permit as well after that. So the first thing is an LMI means a labor market impact assessment. It's exactly what it says. It is an assessment to deem what is the labor market impact it will have for a company or a business to bring in a foreign worker. Okay. Now you need to go through a process where the company is very hands-on and needs to advertise, typically advertise. They need to send in a proof funds and the legitimacy of the business. Okay. So this is what is required for an LMI typically. It's not easy to find an employer that's willing to help you with it because it is a bit of a timely process. But nonetheless, an LMI. Now, once you have an LMI, you could get a work permit with that. So it's a two-step process. First is LMI, second is work permit. Now, you have under this LMI, there's different types, but there's neither. Let's just break it down very simply. There's just a type that basically requires you to have a job offer from a company, and then there's other type where you could own a business. It's called an owner operator. You could own a business. So let me just put owner operator. So you can own a business and you could essentially hire yourself as an executive or as a worker. Okay. So this is an LMI. And I'm going to quickly touch on the owner operator a little bit more because I think this might be applicable to some of you. Listen, there is business programs in the PNP programs. There's other ways you can immigrate through business, but this is a kind of a bit of a popular program right now because it's relatively quick. But there has been some big changes announced to this program. So let me just tell you what this program is. Essentially, you have to show the business that you mean government that you own 51% of a new or existing business. You have to show that you are an executive. Now, you cannot be an executive of a one-person company or a few-person company. You have to show that you are a CEO, that you are, you have. So it's best to have a business that has a decent number of employees. They want to see that you're investing funds, at least 200. I'd say around 400K is ideal. Okay. So, but you could also go down to 200K. We could work within the confines if the business is smart enough, essentially. So this is one way that people basically, essentially, if you apply for this, the owner operated LMI, and you get it, you're going to get a knock code 00. Okay. Now, remember before the work experience here in the express entry, you get work experience, you get points. You also get points for job offer. Now I'm showing you how this all ties in. That's the point of this exercise, is to show you how getting a job, getting a work permit could yield you to getting qualified for express entry. So you get a job offer. Now, 400, you get 200 points, which is a lot of points. For 0AB, you have 50 points. Okay, so these are additional points. Now, once you get the points, you could also work and you could get work experience as well. So you get a 2-year work permit. So after 1 year, you could qualify for this program. Essentially, what I'm proving to you is that by getting a work permit, here, it can help you get PR, and that's how you kind of get guided through it. Now, one of the big changes that happen is that now you have to, not only do you have to own the business and have the money, but now you have to actually find a Canadian to do this job. And you have to prove to the government that there isn't a Canadian to be a CEO. A CEO is a job. Remember that, folks. We're not talking about owning a company. Anyone could own a business, but we're talking about operating the business, being a CEO or an executive or a VP, right? It is a job that you're doing for that, and you have to pay yourself a salary in this organization of 100 and around, I think, $25,000. It's a big salary you pay yourself. So now it's April 1st is when that's going to happen. It's going to essentially become much more difficult to apply. So, it's still possible, but you want to basically be careful of this application, especially in April. Okay, so that is the owner operator
Hey,
aspect, and
Blaine.
it's still LMIs. Yeah.
I think we have two questions in the chat. They are from Delhi. First question is about experience, if the experience must be in Canada and in your own country. And the second question is about if the business must be in Canada or in your own country.
Okay, well, the first thing is the experience must be, it depends, if it depends, Canada or depends on the program, right? Like I said, here, federal skilled worker is 1 year international or Canadian experience class. So to answer your question, both, it depends. You probably want Canadian experience class though, because the government really is giving favoritism to people who are already in Canada working. That seems to be where the direction is. But 1 year international work experience works as well. The second one, let me see the second question. And the next one is the business must be in Canada. Business must be in Canada. Canada, Canada, Canada. So that's all they want. They want you to have operations in Canada. Okay. So this is the LMI way of getting a work permit. Now, the second way of doing that, doing this application, I'm just going to delete this and just clear this page up quickly. Oh, sorry. So this is the owner operator. Okay. Now, the second way that you can immigrate to Canada with a business, okay, so this is for those who have businesses already, existing operations, is you could apply for an LMIA exempt. So you don't need to go through this whole process, exempt work permit. Now, the way this happens is two ways. So one way is an intra-company transfer, ICT. Basically, you have a company in your home country. So let's say you're in Colombia. Okay. Well, actually, C is not a good idea. Let's say India. So India, and you have a company and you have a reasonable business that's operational, that's generating revenue. You have employees. Now you want to open an office in Canada. Okay, a small office in Canada. So what we do is essentially help you establish a business plan that will show the government, and you have to have finances and resources to put into this business. And you have to have a business plan that makes sense, and you have to show that you're going to create jobs and it's going to be a viable business. So this company in India will do that and essentially open up an office in Canada. Once you open up an office in Canada, you could transfer employees to this company. Okay. That's the best way. Now, it's one of two things. If you already have a business in Canada, then we just have to do that. If you do not, and you need to start a new office in Canada, then it is an ICE intercompany transfer, but it's a startup. Okay. And they usually only give a 1 year work permit. Why? Because they want to see after 1 year, hey, did you do this? Did you start the office? Did you create it? Where did it go? Now, remember, once you get this, you're going to get a work permit. Okay. Again, going back to the express entry, this is all going to equal express entry points here. Okay. So this is how you having a business helps you get PR, or it gets you a job that gets you a PR. Now, one thing that's important to just pay attention to is you need language in all of your applications, okay? You need a CLB, a language benchmark of 7 or 5. 5 is applicable for NOC B. OA is 7. So if you have experience as a manager, or you bring yourself over as a CEO or as a VP, well, you need to score a CLB 7. Okay, if you happen to get a job as a chef, for example, or a mechanic, then you just need a CLB 5. Okay. All right. So moving forward from here. So you have your ICT, you have your programs. So this is work permits LMI and LMI exempt. The major takeaway here that I want everyone to keep in mind is the big question is, how do I get a work permit? That's the critical component. How do you get a work permit? And as I showed you before, through Express Entry and even through the P&P programs, the provincial programs, a lot of them require you to work in that province. So the main thing is getting that work permit could help you essentially set up your future for it. Okay, so the second aspect I want to cover, again, sticking with how to get a work permit, is I want to talk about study permits and open work permits. So just to quickly cover, open work permit, just give me 1 second, sorry. What you want to do is an open work permit allows you to work really anywhere in Canada, in any job. So the way that you get a work permit is a couple ways. One is there is an IEC. So this is for certain countries. India isn't listed, Colombia isn't listed, but like Chile is listed, for example. Mexico is on its way to be listed. The UK, Australia, South Korea, Slovenia, Croatia, Italy, certain countries are listed. Basically, you could get a working holiday for some countries, and every country is different. It could be 1 year, it could be 2 years, it could be, you could do it more than once, but you typically have to be under 35 years old, in some cases 30. Okay, so you have to be under the age, and this currently right now is closed due to COVID. But so this is one option that you could get an open work permit. The other way you could get a work permit is if your spouse is working or in school. Okay, or is working or in school. Okay, this is another way that you could basically get you could get an open work permit here. You could also get open work permits if for other immigration programs as well, which I'm not going to cover because it's not going to be relevant to you. But this is for people who might be getting removed out of the country, or we had to apply for humanitarian or refugee. There's other ways to get a work permit as well, but again, this is more online. Another way to get a work permit, of course. So these are open work permits again. Okay. Now, study permits is a great way that a lot of people immigrate to Canada, because if you apply for a study, so let's say there's two people, let's say there's Bob and Susie, okay? So let's say Bob goes to school, okay? Let's say Bob goes to school and he goes to and the school must be DLI, Designated Learning Institute. If Bob goes to school, Susie could get a work permit. So she could work anywhere. Okay. Now, when Bob graduates, Bob will also get a 1 or a 3-year work permit. Now, that's only if he attends a public school. Private schools don't count. So it's very important you choose the right school. So once you graduate, Bob graduates, he gets a 1 to 3-year work permit. Well, the good news is Susie continues to work as well during this time. Now, what's the difference between 1 and 3-year work permit is based on how many years you study. If you study for 1 year, you get 1 year. If you study for 2 years, you get a 3-year work permit. If you study for 3 years, you get 3 years. If you study for 4 years, you get 3 years. Okay? So this is a very common practice that many people do, because like I said, you get that 1 year experience, you now qualify for CEC, and then you're building your points. Okay. It's important that throughout this entire time, though, remember, it's still point based. Okay. So even if you do these things, if you are over 45 and let's say you only have a college degree, under the old points, which was just last month, you probably wouldn't still qualify. Okay, so don't think that you just do this, you would for sure immigrate. It's not that simple and straightforward. Immigration could change, points could happen, lots of things could happen. Okay, so this is a way that essentially you could get an open work permit, and you could get that Canadian experience class. Okay, I think we have some questions or.
There are more like comments.
Okay,
We have
perfect. Yeah.
people attending that are from Peru, so they they just wanted to
Yeah.
put in there.
No problem. And just a heads up, Peru isn't listed on the IEC country. Okay, it's
Yeah.
not.
One question I have, Blaine, about the work permit. So the work permit for the different options that you have given us here, it will depend, I guess, where the people are located, right? For example, for intercompany transfer or startup intercompany transfer, you get a work permit or it's a temporary residence for how long usually is. The startup you said is for 1 year, but the normal intercompany transfer, how long
Oh,
gets
thanks. That's a good question, Miriam, and I missed that. So yeah, just going back to that question, the intercompany transfer after, like, it's basically 2 to 4. You could get a couple years, you could get 3 or 4 years. Really, it depends on the officer and what we say, but typically it's usually 2 to 3 years afterwards. Okay, so basically the startups. Let's pretend you don't have a Canadian office. Once you do this, you have to apply for the startup because the government, you don't have an office yet, you don't have anything, you're really new. So once you do that, you get 1 year, but then you apply again, you'll get 2 or 3 years after that. Now if you happen to work for an organization that does happen to have an existing office, well then you could just transfer yourself over, and then you could get 2 or 3 years or whatever the case is. Okay, for Carmen's asking that you missed that information. I'll quickly cover it, Carmen. But essentially, open work permit. Under certain programs, you could get an open work permit, which allows you to work anywhere in Canada. If you work with an open work permit in a skilled job, okay, you could get, for 1 year, you could qualify for Canadian experience class. If you qualify for Canadian experience class, that will help you increase your chances to immigrate to Canada. Okay. Now, the way to get the work permit, that's the biggest question of it all. This is how these are the options that you could kind of get the work permit options set up. So the way you do that is basically, if you are from certain countries under 35 or under 30, you could maybe qualify for a working holiday, one option. The other option is if you are the spouse, if you're married or common law to someone who has a work permit in Canada. That's one way you could do it. If your partner, spouse of someone who's going to school in Canada, you could get a work permit as well. Or if you go to school and you graduate in a public school, okay, certain schools, and you graduate, you will get a work permit once you graduate. So those are the ways you could get a work permit, an open work permit. Okay. The ones I covered earlier, LMI exempt, it's not open. It is tied to a company, a specific company. Okay. So these are closed work permits. Okay. Does it matter for PR? It doesn't. As long as your closed work permit is a skilled job and you've done the work. The government doesn't, the government cares if it's closed, like if it's under these programs, you're going to get more points. Okay. Because it is a job offer. Okay. So you're going to get more points, but the experience doesn't matter as long as you hit the Canadian experience. Here, the open work permit, you will not get those additional points, but you will qualify because you've worked for 1 year in Canada. Okay, no problem, Carmen. Okay, so hopefully that clarifies the situation, or gives you clear understanding. Okay, so moving ahead. So the startup visa program, we're going to switch gears into that. So the first thing is this is a federal program, as I mentioned earlier. Okay. Basically, the real major ingredients are these items here. The first thing is you need a letter of support from an entity, an organization that's designated, and LATAM is an organization that is designated, and there are others as well. These organizations must essentially see, value in your business. They must see that you have a business concept that could do well in Canada, that could be proven, and they feel can meet have a good chance of success. These entities are regulated and permitted by the government and organizations to do this. It is essentially like a license, okay? And these entities must do what they need to protect that license by offering a good quality service, by providing success stories, by providing businesses that make viable sense, okay? So they get thousands of applicants all the time. It's very competitive, and they must go through many ideas, just like a pitch competition, just like VCs do. It's not an easy application, but it's still worth trying and applying. But it's important that you understand and you're patient with these organizations, that not everyone's going to be selected, and not everyone is going to, there's no special treatment here. So something important to understand. Second thing is you need a language of CLB5, so you need to have English or French. You need to own at least 10%, and the international people must own 50. So if you have a friend and you're from India and someone is from China, okay, or Colombia, and you both go 50-50, or you both go 25% and 10%, doesn't work. Why? Doesn't equal the 50. But if this person goes 45% and this person goes 5%, doesn't work. Why? Because this person doesn't own 10%. But if this person owns 40% and this person owns 11%, this is fine. Or 41% and 10%, this is okay as well. Okay? So this is how this works in terms of the equity ownership. Once you apply for the startup visa, you could then apply for a work permit. Okay, so the idea is specific to the company. Okay, so this work permit will, let's say bring Bob back, Bob and Susie. Oops, let's bring Bob and Susie. So Bob works for the startup. Okay, he applied for a startup visa. Susie's the his wife. She could get an open work permit because Bob has a work permit already. Okay. So the good news is, going through this, both people, if you are a two-person family, or husband or in a if you are in a conjugal or spousal relationship or common law relationship, you could qualify for that. And processing times, well, they say 12 to 16 months, but for whatever reason, when you apply, it's 32 months, 31 months. So the processing time is dramatically increased. Now, we are investigating this at the moment to try to understand why and what's going on. It is most likely due to COVID. What's really interesting about this application, even though it is startup visa, it's startup and it's tech, it is a paper application. So this is probably, I think, one of the big contributors of the issues, is that it's paper, it's not online. So, I think there's a big delay happening. I'm assuming this, and we're still waiting to find out more details, but I'm assuming that it has to do with the logistics of the paper and these applications that's creating a lot of issues. Okay. But essentially, that's a startup visa program. It is a wonderful program. It's fairly strong. The greatest risk for this program, in my opinion, is when you submit the application, the government may decide, hey, I don't know this business, or I have questions about it, or I'm not too confident about it. I'm going to ask another organization to review this business and to provide an opinion and to see if it's approved or not. So that's called a peer review. Okay. So this is another reason why LATAM, why organizations have to be very diligent, because they don't want to submit an application that goes to peer review and gets rejected. It just doesn't look good for these organizations, okay? So this is another reason why the selection process has to be thought of with great care, okay? So that's startup visa. That's pretty much wraps up immigration in terms of the economics. So we covered the express entry system. We covered how getting a temporary work permit or study permit or an LMI or intra-company transfer, essentially getting a work permit gets you to PR. And we cover the startup visa program and the ownership. So, closing thoughts is the importance of planning in advance, knowing your options, knowing what you're prepared to do, knowing what resources you have available. The structure of your organization is important. As you could see, owning 51% is important, or owning 10% is important. Immigration changes extremely quickly, very fast. So it's always good to act quickly, and don't be indecisive. If you're already thinking about Canada, you want to do it, find out your options, apply right away. Strategy is very important. Get your timelines, work with an organization that understands all programs and strategy. Okay. And of course, Bright Immigration is here to help. We are a full-pledged immigration firm. Our team of licensed consultants are here. We also have a business immigration we help with. We have student immigration that we help people get into schools with. We are a full-service immigration service. Now, I always like to tell people, always remember, business equals immigration, not immigration equals business. Always focus on the quality of the business. Okay. The better the business is, the better chances you have to immigrate. Okay. Now,
We have a question, Blaine. Carmen is asking about investor's visa.
yeah, the investor visa program, there really isn't a formal investor visa program. Only in Quebec there is, and it opens and closes extremely quickly within a few days, if that. Okay, so there is an investor program in Quebec. Currently, there isn't any federal programs, but who knows? That could very well change in the near future. Okay, if you're interested in the investor program, you should probably reach out to us so that way we could kind of put you on a list and keep you apprised of any changes that may come up. But typically, investor visa, you need to, from experience, you need to have around 300,000, 250, 300,000 liquid cash. You need to commit $800,000 for 5 years usually. So it depends. Okay.
Okay, Blaine, we have another question. Deli, you can open your microphone if you like to.
Oh, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, Blind. It's just I have a question about that. Is about the business you can open on in Canada, because I went last time to the startup visa, and I asked, do you remember about my business is no is not how you say,
Qualified for a startup visa?
yeah, I think so, because
Okay.
we don't have the ownership or develop a new our own system. I think it's just for people who develop some. I don't remember the word,
Okay,
but
so just tell me your question. What's your question?
yeah. Um, and in this case, how we can apply for a visa, a startup visa,
Do you
or
have an existing business in your country now?
yeah, yeah, but we don't have our own developed technology. That's the
Yeah, the
thing.
thing is that I think she doesn't have intellectual property over
Uh,
the technology.
property, yeah, that's
Yeah.
my.
So
Okay,
I
you
think
don't
she's
have,
opting for ICT startup.
okay, so you don't have IP. Okay. So yeah, so that's startup, but you don't need intellectual property for the
Oh,
intercompany transfer. What you need to do, you need to show that this business is going to be viable, that you're going to need employees, that you have enough money to get this business to a place where you could hire, two, three, four people in the next year to 2 years, right? So it's more about the bit. You could be a manufacturing company, you could make shoes, you could be a tech, you could do whatever, you could be a distributor for food, there's many different things you could do. But it has a lot to do with the success of your existing business back home, right? Like if your business is only doing 100,000 or 200,000 Canadian, it's really hard to prove that you're going to have what it takes to be successful and make $1 million here, right? So the ICT is really good. But even if you don't have an existing business, you could still use a business plan. Okay, you don't need to have an existing business back home necessarily.
okay.
You could still do a business here, but I'm just letting you know it could be a difficult application if you don't have a business already established back home, though. Like it's best to have one. Okay.
Yeah, Deli, I will advise you, maybe you can go to the website and explore the corporate program that doesn't require IP. And Blaine, you know, he has, I think you are going to talk about the platform, right, Blaine?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
platform.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, I was thinking just Latam is just working with IP.
No,
No.
for the startup visa program, we work with just companies in IP because that's what the requirement from the government is. But the corporate program doesn't require to have IP. So we have a couple of companies already in corporate program. So you can explore that option. If you go to the website, you will see Innovation Center. And there you will see what is the corporate program about. Maybe that's something that you can explore as well. Blaine is going to share here, you know, maybe a solution that can help you to identify what is your best option for visas.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and like I said, the intercompany transfer, you know, as long as you have a viable business, it could work. So leading on to Miriam's point, I want to introduce everyone to a new platform. It is a revolutionary. We're very excited about this platform. It's called Improved. But essentially, you know, by filling out a questionnaire at the end of it, within, you know, it takes no more than 10 minutes, really. It's usually maybe even like 6 to 8, 7 minutes to just fill out the details of your background. And it's going to automatically tell you which programs you should start looking into, right? Now, these programs will be like provincial nominees, which ones you should maybe consider based on your job experience. It's going to tell you how many points you would score. And it will also tell you what you need to do to improve your points. Now, just note that it is in beta still, but a lot of the functionality still works. And I'm telling you, it does a better job than most consultants and lawyers out there, just because it is just goes through all of the programs, you know, and we look at knock codes, you know, we do a pretty good dive in. So, you know, it's worth a shot. Take a look at it. It won't hurt you at all. And it would only give you a little bit more guidance of things that you should maybe consider. It's, you know, and then go from there. Okay, so just the website domain is www.getimproved.com, and you just put in your email address. You don't have to pay; it's free. You just go through it. At the end, you'll get the recommendations. So it's good to do it if you have, you know, put aside some time, because at the moment the functionality just shows you the results. So you want to go through it, click, you know, play around with it, because it doesn't save the data for you at the end at the moment. So, you know, just when you have some time, you can get yourself a coffee or a tea or something and go through it.
Yeah. So I'm not sure, people, if you have any other questions for Blaine, but I think, you know, the presentation was pretty much solid in different cases that, you know, different options you have to immigrate to Canada as an entrepreneur or not. But certainly we are passing this information and this recording video to all of you. So you can get, you know, to access Get Improved. It will be good that you maybe test it out and see what is going to be the best option for you based in your particular case. As Blaine said, it's totally a free tool that you can use in order to see what is your best option. I don't know, Blaine, you have anything else to add to this presentation?
No, that's it. That's fine.
Okay, perfect. So anybody else has any other questions here? If there is no other question, then we're going to finish the presentation here. Just be mindful. Oh, so we have another question. I think it's Carmen. So to be enrolled into the startup program, needs to have work permit visa and company in our company with more than 2,000 revenue per year. Okay, Carmen, I think I understand that your question is about startup visa program. If you can open your microphone, please.
Okay. No, sorry. I just wanted to know if the company in Peru or another country needs to be a company that generated more of $100,000 or $200,000 per year to be able to to expand in Canada.
Okay, so for the startup visa program per se, Carmen, there is let's say you have to prove that you have enough funding to stay for a year, especially for the work permit, because as Blaine explained it, Study Visa program gives you a permanent residence, but as well is giving you a work permit while the permanent residence is processing. So to do that, you have to demonstrate that you have enough funding for a year. And usually, this is more directed to operational cost of the company. So this is not just about, oh, I have funding to pay myself, food and accommodation. This is the operational cost of the company. So depending of the case, I will say the minimum is around $200,000, but that's very, very limited. It's kind of going to a very great line there. We have companies that already have revenue. They can show, that actually they can transfer money to Canada at some point in order to self-sustain for that first year, because nobody is assuming that you're going to have customers right away. So that's right. That's why, we need to know that you have enough funding. But let's say every single case is a particular case. So I cannot tell you for sure that's going to be the minimum amount that you require. Depends of the case.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So, and as Blaine said, the intercompany transfer is certainly a solution. I've seen some companies, for example, we have in the corporate program, one of them is under intercompany transfer, and it works really well. But Blaine, I have a question for you for that part, the intercompany transfer. I believe the work permit or temporary residence that people is getting, it depends where they are located sometimes, because I seen, for example, some people from Brazil can have some problems actually accessing to that type of visa. I'm not sure why, but do you have any sense if that depends of the country or depends of the business per se?
Sorry, your question again was that for the intercompany transfer?
Yeah,
you
to
get the
be
work
approved
permit?
in that visas, it depends where the company is located. For example, I've seen with Mexico is kind of like 2 weeks is extremely fast, but I've seen with other countries may take a little bit longer. I'm not sure it's because of the country per se, or is it that the
So
type of business?
yeah, so basically, no. So intercompany transfer, typically what you do is you get an opinion letter. First, you have to apply for a work permit. It's a work permit application. So it depends on before COVID. So some people could get it at the border if they're visa exempt, like Mexico. Okay. But if you're not visa exempt, you have to send in your application for a work permit process. Now, when it's a work permit, it goes under the processing times for visas in that country. It could take a few weeks or it could take a few months. It depends on the country. So yeah, Miriam, when you submit that work permit, it would depend on the country of how long it takes for that processing if they need a visa. If they do not need a visa to enter Canada, they could get it at the border. Now, just note that all this is not applicable during COVID at the moment. COVID has obviously, put a lot of travel bans and restrictions on people entering the country. So, but before COVID, that's how it would work. Does that answer your question? Miriam, does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
yeah,
Yeah,
that
perfect.
answered my question. Thank you so
Okay,
much, Blaine.
you're welcome.
It's always important also for the audience to understand that besides, we do our best, and Blaine does his best also to provide timing and provide the right information. This information is changing very fast, with the pandemic situation. It depends. The countries are opening up in the second semester. Maybe conditions are changing again. So just keep an eye on our community. We are having more Canada's 101 coming up in this year. And Blaine is always here, to help people in our community to understand better, their situation. So again, try to go to the platform, fill out your information, and maybe you will get, good information about what type of visa is the best for you. It's 11 already, so in an hour we are going to see you again for another session, this time with incorporation. with our lawyers in that area. So thank you so much, Blaine, for being
No
here
problem. It was a
today.
pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank you for your
and
time.
all of you guys are going to get, this recording as well, information about Bright Immigration if you want to reach out. Thank you so much.
Thank
See
you.
you in a bit.